Yo, what's going on everyone? Sim here with another 100% review in The Sinking City, an open world Lovecraftian detective game released in 2019 by developer Frogwares, who you might know from the Sherlock Holmes games. But before we dive into Oakmont, what is a 100% review? A 100% review is, well, a review of a game after I have achieved the game's completion, be that the base game, the DLC, or both. The Sinking City has a total of 28 achievements and took me roughly 12 hours to 100%. To confirm this, you may find my Steam profile linked below. Now, while I aim to not spoil the games I play, there may be some light story spoilers as well as gameplay footage used from various points within the game. But our first stop on this review is the story, and Sinking City really delivers in this department. With a long history of developing Sherlock Holmes games, I believe these guys have made about 6 of those titles. I would expect Frogwares to develop a detective story that is strong. However, needless to say, they have really delivered here. We play as Detective Charles Reed, a former World War I veteran and Navy diver turned private eye based in Boston, who has been suffering from visions since surviving the wreck of the Navy vessel he served on during the war, the USS Cyclops. Credit to Backlogger86 for letting me know in the first impressions video that the Cyclops was actually a real vessel that did vanish without a trace in 1918. And Joshua Zhao also provided some great insight into the parallels between this title and H.P. Lovecraft's short story Dagon. That was really awesome to read, guys. Thank you so much. At the invitation of Professor Johannes Vanderberg, Reed travels to the mysterious city of Oakmont to learn more about how he can stop his visions. Now, Oakmont is not exactly a happy place. The citizens of Oakmont are fairly isolated and develop their own dialect for certain terms, such as K. The city itself doesn't even appear on any maps of America, and to make matters more dire, 6 months prior to the events of the game, it started raining and, well, it never stopped, resulting in large portions of the city to be completely submerged and flooded. Oh, and there's also a bunch of monsters that have been spawning around the place called wild beasts. Our actual plot here is fairly simple really. Search for a way to break the madness and visions for exploring 9 interconnected cases and making choices that most certainly have consequences. Each of the 9 cases have been crafted well, and I found that only one of them really outstayed its welcome, with the rest ending on some interesting revelation or a consequence created by my actions within. There are also several fun side quests here that further develop the character behind Oakmont itself, and while shorter, were for the most part worth playing as well. I didn't really think any of these were too filler, except maybe there was one side quest that was kind of a fetch quest where you just sort of went around the map picking up various different items. The actual detective gameplay in each of these cases is also quite interactive, and if you've played the Sherlock Holmes games, you'll be quite familiar with what is at play here. You often get clues to the cases by interacting with objects or notes around a crime scene or location, before going to your mind place, which looks very similar to an Assassin's Creed loading scene, replaying the events that took place and then piecing together the sequence of events. This was quite fun and not too overused. And that brings us onto the characters of the Sinking City. This game has a wide cast of memorable characters, many of who are reoccurring throughout the game. I think that this game has done a great job with its cast here. You have several core characters that fuel the main story, with a background of smaller ones that serve to make the city feel alive. From the bartender who deeply mistrusts you as an outsider and huffs whenever you return to your hotel, to Joy, a former singer whose mouth has been sewn shut for gossiping. These characters form a network of believable people just trying to stay alive in a city that is sinking beneath them. Charles Reed is a serviceable protagonist and honestly the weakest character of the bunch. I think a large part of that is just the deadpan look that he poses and his flat voice. Happy, sad, mad, shocked, or locked in, Reed sounds not too dissimilar to a parent finding out that their child received a bad grade on their report. The city itself can also definitely be considered a character here. And while it's certainly no Night City from Cyberpunk, Oakmont has multiple districts that vary well from each other. One of the most important things to me with an open world game especially is that the world is believable and looks lived in. It's not just a set piece with a bunch of interactive icons scattered about, and Oakmont does deliver here. From the sandy shores of the port to the high rise of Reed Heights, Oakmont is distinct, and in a game where traversal plays a very important part, I found that this 1920s love letter to Lovecraft left a lasting impression on me. Now, let's look at the progression and crafting systems of the game, as Sinking City does have both of these features, and well, they get the job done without being anything exciting. Leveling in the skill tree is up first. Completing quests and killing wild beasts earns us XP. XP that can then be used to level up Reed's abilities, however these are essentially just the basics. One tree lets you reload faster with the various weapons of the game, another lets you craft ammo with fewer resources, one gives you more health, and another lets you earn double XP for all quests. There is nothing here that really defines how your version of Charles Reed plays and how you can make him distinct. You could probably neglect this entire system and get through the game without any issues whatsoever. The crafting system really isn't much better either. The game sets this up as this really cool concept. Oakmont has abandoned money after the floods and adopted a bartering system. You're warned very early on, like in the first case, that bullets matter and must be used sparingly. But this is just completely undone by a crafting system that allows you to make your own bullets and just keeps you low on them by not allowing you to carry more. The idea that Reed has the smallest pockets ever is quite frankly hilarious. You won't be short on bullets because you missed too many of your shots, but instead because the game has decided Reed can only carry 6 shotgun slugs unless you unlocked a skill to carry 8. And this is entirely why the crafting system exists, to not allow you to get overpowered and to give the player shiny things to collect as they explore the city. I really do wish they'd fleshed this out a bit more and actually bought into that bartering idea they set up. In fact, the only time bartering is ever used in this entire game was the very first case, when I was able to buy information from a drunk for 1 bullet. There is also a weird sanity system here that you can craft medication to suppress, but I found this to be either lackluster at best or annoying at worst. By being exposed to the horrors around Oakmont, Reed can lose sanity. This often really just means that the camera adopts a fish-eyed lens and gets a little hazy, sometimes to an obnoxious level. However, losing too much sanity will create shades of monsters that attack you and deal damage. They don't actually exist, they're not there, but they can harm you. A cool idea in theory, however, this immediately loses all impact when simply creating a cure for this, just via quickly crafting it in the menu, removes it completely. And it's so underutilized that I often forgot it even existed, until my camera started going wonky. I can only think of one particular example in the entire game again, where during a case, if you look at a certain item, it spikes your insanity right the way to the max level and a bunch of shades attack you all at once, which was kind of cool and very unexpected, but just never used enough. And like I said, a simple item is enough to completely negate this entire system and is very, very easy to craft. In fact, you'll probably run through the entire game with most of your guns maxed out in ammo, your health gets maxed out, and also these sanity tablets as well. A quick look at the technical state of the game now, and it's solid. In my 12 hours of the Sinking City, I encountered 0 crashes, moderate to minor frame drops, and no real glitches. There was some graphical pop-ins here and there, but nothing too distracting. I think the only weird thing I saw in the entire game was Reed holding his gun sideways after a hallucination. And this was simply fixed by just aiming my gun. That just realigned the gun to be facing the right way. The game is also verified on Steam Deck. Now, I do not own a Steam Deck, however I do own an ROG Ally X, and found the game ran very well on the default settings. Several sections of the game, in fact, were completed on lunch breaks and on the commute to and from work. On my PC with an RTX 4070 Super Ti, the game ran on all settings on Ultra without any hiccups, and my experience with the game on console, namely just the base PS5 and a little bit of the PS4 Pro back in the day, were also great. Gameplay is next, and this is another mixed bag really. The gameplay loop of the Sinking City boils down to this: go to point A, talk to person, go to an archive to find the location of an event, travel to said event, find items, go to archive to learn about the item, so on and so on. This probably sounds really dull, but it just wasn't. I think the setting here carries the gameplay loop entirely. This game is set in the 1920s in a city that our character has never visited, let alone ever seen on a map. So when a character tells him that he needs to find Mr. Bentley's house on the corner of Burke Road and Salamander Street, our character has exactly no clue where that is. And so we must use one of the many resources available to track down the location. Need to find out more about surgeries performed on shoulder reconstruction? Off to the hospital you go. Victims of robberies? You can find that data at the police station. I love this system. The fact that the game doesn't slap you with a quest marker and actually forces you to pay attention to the clues in your case to progress had me locked in from case 1 right up until case 9. I think that because the game has a good fast travel system as well, and there are enough fast travel points scattered around the map, that this really helps. If you get a street wrong and you go to the wrong location, you aren't too heavily punished by needing to backtrack too far. And as the city is half underwater, there is also enough of a change up with traversal to keep getting around the city interesting. Crossing a district often has you on foot for a few streets, then jumping onto your small boat, the Cyclops 2, and navigating the flooded streets before jumping back onto dry land and continuing. I also really liked how ruined buildings were often used for set pieces. You could often find yourself in a building that's sinking into the ground and has a flooded basement that you need to work your way through. There are also small sections of the city that are blocked off and infested with wild beasts, which leads us onto the combat section of this video. Combat in the Sinking City is another mixed bag. You have a variety of ranged weapons, from your handguns to your rifles, a Tommy gun, and the best weapon of the game, the shotgun. Reed also has a trench shovel at the ready for melee. Now, the gunplay is stiff, but it does get the job done. There are several enemy types here, including human enemies and various different variants of the wild beasts, with neither being too fast to aim and fight against. Depending on the difficulty you play on, you may find a lack of ammo to be your biggest hurdle in gunfights. However, as stated before, that's just entirely due to the crafting system, and you can likely just craft more bullets immediately. Aiming is definitely clunky, but responsive enough where you can aim and land headshots reliably. But the melee combat is a different story. Melee in the Sinking City is nothing short of frustrating. What should be a safe alternative to wasting resources boils down into a dance of aimlessly swinging at enemies and hoping you land a hit. It's frustrating and it just does not work. There is also no impact with melee swings. With the gunplay, if you shoot an enemy, it'll stumble about and be staggered for a second or two. However, with the melee, you can bash a baddie with a shovel and they won't even flinch. The combat feels very much like an afterthought, and I found myself more often than not trying to avoid fights where possible, as they just felt immersion breaking. There are a couple of boss fights through the story. Off the top of my head, there are 2 primary ones, however these really just boil down into bigger bullet sponges, the exception being a boss where you throw orbs into the boss for extra damage. And now for the achievements and trophies for the Sinking City. This game can be completed across all major platforms. There's a Platinum Trophy, 1000G Gamer Score, and Steam achievements here, and the current versions of the game have 28 achievements to earn. Interestingly, the original release of the game has 29 to earn, with an additional achievement tied to the side quest, All Sewn Up, which is tied to the character Joy. I'm really not sure why this was omitted from later releases of the game, as the side quest does indeed still exist. Now, the achievements here are very missable, But with careful saving and not a worry, over 20 of the 28 achievements can be missed and are tied to options you choose during the main quest and side missions. What makes this manageable is the 3 save system. I could create a manual save at the start of a case and then use the other 2 slots to systematically save at points I may need to reload. Because of this, the achievements gave me no trouble in this game, and if I had to give the completion a difficulty rating, I would only give it a 3 out of 10 in difficulty, and this is really only because of the sheer number of trophies that can be potentially missed. The game can be completed on any difficulty, and there are a few to choose from, as there are no difficulty trophies. There are also no collectible trophies, meaning this is largely just a game where you can focus on the story and enjoy earning everything. There is a fantastic guide for the achievements on psmp.com by Lonesome Roads, and I've linked that below. But let's wrap up this review, shall we? For the most part, I would say that The Sinking City is a love letter to Lovecraft lore. The developers built on their past experiences with story-driven games, and crafted an open world that oozes atmosphere. Now, with the developers' past being focused solely on story-based games, it is no wonder here that the various gameplay systems are the weakest link. Notably, the combat needs some work. With that being said, I am excited that Frogware recently announced the sequel is in development, and I am looking forward to delving back into this world. I would absolutely recommend completionists go for this one, as the trophies are often rewarding story-wise. And if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much. Your support is appreciated more than you know. Drop a like, a comment, and subscribe. That will actually net you the 100% for YouTube. And of course, happy hunting.